Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we got another news and rumor review to discuss. In today's video, we're looking at some signings that happened for our past couple of days, some injury updates, some big pieces of news involving a lot of things, including the Islanders and Kings GM position, and we also got a couple of trade rumors to talk about involving the Flames, Canucks, Wild, and a couple of other teams, which all of that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey Channel. Now before we get started, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never do it without you guys, so if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below and don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment section below so all that discussed in today's video. So as usual in our trade rumor videos, we're going to start off by looking at some signings. These signings happened a couple of weeks ago, so you might remember a couple of them, but I'm going to go through all the signings that happened just a few weeks back. We saw 11 signings over that time frame, so we'll touch on all of those signings from over the past couple of days. So first, we saw Winnipeg Jets give a 3-year ELC with AV of $860,000 to center left wing prospect, 6th round pick back in the 2024 draft, so just this past year, Kieran Walton. So that's an interesting sign there. Walton, like we said, is a forward prospect. I think eventually might be able to challenge like a bomb sex role. He was a late round pick, but did do really good this year over in, I think it was juniors. So interesting note there, and Walton signs his ELC with the Jets, so that's really good stuff there. The Seattle Kraken have signed right wing prospect, 4th round pick, 116th overall back in the 2023 draft, Andrei Lashko, to a 3-year ELC with AV of $870,000 that began to start next year. Lashko is a really solid prospect. This past year been playing over in the OHL, so Lashko looks like a really good prospect. I think eventually could challenge like maybe Milsic's role on the Seattle Kraken, so interesting note there. But Lashko has signed his ELC. Then we saw New York Rangers sign AHL depth forward Anton Blidh to a 2-year contract extension with AAV of league minimum. Blidh's been bouncing around over the past couple of years. He was in Seattle, I think, for a couple of years. He was originally, I think, from Boston. He played a couple of seasons in Colorado, but this year he's been playing over in the Rangers organization. Did enough for the Rangers to sign him to an extension. So interesting note there, but Blidh has signed a 2-year extension to remain with New York Rangers in their organization. Then we saw the Montreal Canadiens sign 5th round draft pick in the 2024 draft, so just this past year, Tyler Thorpe, who's a right winger, to a 3-year ELC with an AV of $868,000. Now Thorpe is a really good prospect. I think eventually, just like Lashko, could challenge like maybe a 3rd or 4th line role in the Canadiens. Still going to be a couple of years away, but still it's an interesting sign there from the Habs as they signed Thorpe. The Seattle Kraken has signed another one of their top prospects, and that is former 2nd round pick in the 2024 draft just this past year, center prospect Nathan Villeneuve to a 3-year ELC with AV of $940,000. Villeneuve is one of the better Kraken forward prospects, probably a B-level guy, not the top level, but really solid guy. Been playing over, I think, in the QMJHL this year. Villeneuve looks like a really solid prospect there for the Kraken. I think eventually could challenge for like a 2nd or 3rd line center role on the Seattle Kraken. So interesting note there, but the Kraken have signed Villeneuve. Now I'm sure a lot of people have already discussed this, but I haven't on this channel, and that was the Habs signing of Ivan Demidov. The Habs signed winger Ivan Demidov, who was 5th overall in this past year's draft back in 2024, from over in Russia to a 3-year ELC with AAV of $940,000. That was for this year and for the future. Demidov got into 2 games at the end of the season for the Canadiens, putting up 2 points. In the playoffs, he wound up having 2 assists in 5 games. So Demidov was a very fantastic add. I'm sure a lot of people were quite stunned to see Demidov come over this early when there was a lot of talk he would spend a year or 2 over in the KHL. So interesting note there, but like we talked about before, Demidov is in Montreal now. He's signed his ELC. He's already gone to NHL game action for the Habs, so interesting note there, but Demidov did sign his ELC a couple of weeks back. Then we saw the Nashville Predators extend one of their UFA signings from this past year's free agent class, and that is Matthew Murray, who was the 3rd stringer this year for the Nashville Predators, or the 4th stringer. So it's a 2-year extension with the AV of league minimum $775,000 to remain in the Nashville Predators organization. Murray was brought in to be a 3rd stringer for the Nashville Predators and did quite well in the AHL, so obviously the Preds saw fit to sign him to an extension, so the Preds have signed Matthew Murray to a 2-year extension to remain as one of their lower end goaltenders in the organization. Then we saw Washington Capitals sign 2023 4th round pick, 104th overall Patrick Thomas, who is a center prospect, to a 3-year ELC with an AAV of $878,000 at the beginning of the start of next year. Thomas looks like a very fantastic prospect as well. He was a middle round draft pick back in the 2023 draft, but had a pretty good season this year. So I think eventually Thomas could challenge for like a bottom 6, maybe a middle 6 role at the NHL level. So interesting out there, but the Caps have signed him. Then we saw the Anaheim Ducks give a 3-year ELC to second-round pick back in the 2023 draft, 59th overall, Terrance, to a 3-year ELC with AAV of $886,000. He's a center prospect. I think eventually could challenge for, like I said, a bottom 6 role. So it's another interesting ELC signing there for the Ducks as they signed Terrance. Then we saw the Nashville Predators extend one of the AHL level players, and that's Navran Mutter, to a 1-year ELC with the AAV of league minimum. Now Mutter's been a decent player over in the AHL for the Predators, so it's just a little bit of more added depth for the Nashville Predators, but interesting note there as they extended Mutter. And then we saw the Toronto Maple Leafs sign Blake Smith to a 3-year ELC with the AAV of $875,000. He was an undrafted player, so Smith I think eventually might be able to be challenging for like a bottom 6 role. I'm not sure how long it'll take for him to crack the NHL roster, but interesting sign there. So lots of intriguing signs from our past couple of days, as we saw some interesting young prospects sign ELCs, such as Terrance in Anaheim, such as Demidov in Montreal, Villeneuve in Nashville, as well as Walton in Winnipeg. And then we also saw a couple of extensions be handed out as the Predators have extended Mutter and Murray to extensions, and the Rangers have signed Blidh to an extension. So interesting signing updates from our past couple of days. Next, going over to a couple of injury updates. So when it comes to the injury updates, we definitely have a couple of things to talk about here. So first, with the Edmonton Oilers, Mattias Ekholm, who missed the last few games of the regular season plus the entire first round due to an undisclosed injury, will not play at all during round 2 for the Edmonton Oilers. That's a bad blow there for the Oilers, as Ekholm is a really big piece of that top 4, but they got through round 1 without him, so they'll have to try and get through round 2 without him as well. Then Ottawa Senators forward B.Tkachuk disclosed that he suffered from a hip injury throughout the second half of the year after the Four Nations, so that's what was sort of ailing him throughout the playoffs. A healthy B.Tkachuk would have been much more scary for Toronto Maple Leafs to face, but still, it's bad news that Tkachuk had to deal with a hip injury towards the back half of the season. Well, Nick Jensen may need off-season surgery for the undisclosed injury he had been dealing with, so it sounds like he will be ready for training camp if he does go through with the surgery. But interesting note there that Jensen and Tkachuk were both injured towards the end of the season. San Jose's William Eklund left a tune-up World Championship game because he was brought into the World Championship after getting cut on the wrist with a skate blade, and it sounds like he will be okay, but he has undergone surgery and will be out 3 months, so he's not going to play in the World Championship game. Should be ready for training camp, but that's a bad blow for one of the young Sharks players. Colorado's Ross Colton, who didn't play since game 1 of round 1 due to a lower body injury, was practicing in a non-contact jersey, but after the Avalanche were eliminated, he's now not going to play until next year. He should definitely be ready for training camp, but that was a bad blow there for the Avalanche to not have Colton for the last 2 games of that series. Winnipeg's Mark Scheifele missed game 7 for the Jets and is day-to-day with an undisclosed injury, and Logan Stanley missed game 7 for the Winnipeg Jets as he's dealing with an undisclosed injury. So a couple of bad blows there for the Jets during game 7, which they didn't wind up winning, but Scheifele their top line center and Stanley a solid third pair defenseman. Both didn't wind up suiting up. Dallas' Jason Robertson and Miro Heiskanen will both probably not be ready to start the second round for the Dallas Stars, but Coach Pierre DeBoer has said they will join the team at some point. So it seems like Robertson's a little bit ahead of Heiskanen at this point, but it does sound like both will have the opportunity to get back at some point in the second round series that they're about to play in. Minnesota's Joel Eriksson Ek has undergone core muscle surgery after dealing with the injury at the end of the season in the playoffs, but he will be ready for training camp, so that's a big boost there for the Wild to see that he will be ready and back for training camp. St. Louis's Tyler Tucker missed game 7 for the St. Louis Blues due to an undisclosed injury. He was out day-to-day. Blues have been eliminated, so he should be back for training camp, but that was a bad blow there for the Blues and a do-or-die game 7. New Jersey's L.Hughes and Jesper Bratt have both undergone shoulder surgery and should be back for the New Jersey Devils by training camp, so that's really good news that they should be back by training camp, but bad blows that both those guys had to go through shoulder surgery. And then Los Angeles' Tanner Jeannot suffered a groin injury, which kept him out of round 1. So we know he missed the tail end of the regular season as well as the playoffs, and it was due to a groin injury. So interesting note there, but those are the injuries from the past couple of days. Good to see guys like Robertson and Heiskanen near return and to get back from their respective injuries. Bad news to see guys like Ekholm, Tkachuk, L.Hughes, and Joel Eriksson Ek all be out with injuries, and hopefully they won't be out for an overly long period of time, but some interesting injury updates from our past couple of days. Next, we'll go over to a few pieces of news that we have to talk about here. So first, I did not mention this because I didn't do a trade rumor video last week, but we saw 2 suspensions last week in round 1 of the playoffs. The first one was Brandon Hagel. He suffered a 1-game suspension in game, I think it was 2 of their first round series, due to a bad hit he laid on Alex Barkov towards the end of the game. It was not an overly great hit. I'm not sure if it was exactly suspension worthy, but the NHL did decide that it was a 1-game suspension. And then Aaron Ekblad, who basically punched Brandon Hagel in the face in game 4, didn't receive any penalties on the play, but they did wind up reviewing it. And NHL player safety did determine that it was a 2-game suspension, so he missed the final game of the Tampa series, as well as the first game of the Toronto series, so he should be eligible to return for game 2 of that Toronto-Florida series. But still, Aaron Ekblad missed 2 games due to suspension, the last game of round 1, the first game of round 2, and Brandon Hagel missed game 3 of the first round due to a suspension as well. So some interesting suspension updates. Going over to a couple of retirements. Back, I think it was at either the end of the regular season or just when the playoffs started, we heard that Cal Clutterbuck, who will not play at the NHL level this year due to not being able to get a contract with anyone, has officially retired. So he was a long-time Minnesota Wild guy, a long-time New York Islanders guy, and he has officially called it a career. So interesting note there. Well, 2 guys who we did know were going to retire at the end of the season, Marc-Andre Fleury with Minnesota and David Savard in Montreal, have both also retired due to the fact that the Habs and the Wild were eliminated from playoff contention. So very interesting stuff there. 3 really good long-time players in Clutterbuck, Fleury, and Savard have all decided to call it quits. Savard had a long career, won a cup with the Tampa Bay Lightning, so interesting stuff there. Marc-Andre Fleury probably going to go down as one of the best goaltenders in NHL history, has officially called it a career, and Cal Clutterbuck, who's been a really solid bottom 6 forward from over the past number of seasons, especially in the Islanders organization, has also called it a career. So 3 intriguing retirements as Fleury, Savard, and Clutterbuck have all decided to call it a career. Going over to a few GM updates. Now, I did a separate video talking about coaching updates. There has been one coaching update since that last video I talked about, and that was with the Nashville Predators, as it sounds like Andrew Brunette will be staying with the Nashville Predators organization. So it seems that the Preds won't be giving up on Andrew Brunette, and he'll be back for another season with the Nashville Predators. So really good stuff there, as Brunette seems like he'll be keeping his head coaching position. But when it comes to GMs, I haven't really been talking about this over the past couple of videos. So I did want to talk about 3 GM updates that we want to talk about. So first, in the New York Rangers organization, Chris Drury has signed an extension. So after Laviolette got fired and then Mike Sullivan got hired, through all of that, the Rangers have extended Chris Drury. There was a lot of people who thought maybe Drury could get fired, but the Rangers are obviously going to keep him around and hope that Drury can lead this team back to the playoffs. So interesting note there. But Drury will not be gone for the Rangers for any length of time. And then in the New York Islanders and Los Angeles Kings organizations, both have not brought back their GMs. So Lou Lamoriello and Rob Blake, who are both the GMs for the Islanders and Kings respectively, were on final contracts, and the Islanders and Kings have both decided to not bring those 2 guys back. So very interesting stuff there. Blake has been able to help the Kings make it to the playoffs year after year, but they keep on losing to Edmonton Oilers. And for Lamoriello, the Islanders didn't even make the playoffs this year. So I don't think it's too much of a surprise. The Islanders and the Kings will both go in different directions. So it sounds like Mark Bergevin, who's an assistant GM, might be a front runner for Los Angeles' GM job. Remember, he's a former GM. He was the GM in the Habs organization a couple of years back. Not sure who the front runners are for the Islanders organization, but we'll bring you updates on those 2 things when they have been announced. But for the time being, the Islanders and the Kings have both not brought back their GMs and are now going to be starting GM searches. So interesting note there. And lastly, going over to a couple of trade rumors. So when it comes to the trade rumors, we have 5 things to talk about here when it comes to the trade rumors. So not anything too big, but just a couple of speculations for things that could happen this offseason, and also for things that didn't happen at the trade deadline. So the one thing I want to talk about the deadline was that it's come out that New Jersey, we know that they acquired Brian Dumoulin and Cody Glass at the trade deadline, but apparently, according to some recent reports, they also tried to acquire Ryan O'Reilly from the Nashville Predators. Now that would have been an interesting trade for the Predators. There's a lot of talk that Ryan O'Reilly's name was in the rumor mill, but even though he doesn't have a no movement clause, the Preds treated him as having a no movement clause. O'Reilly indicated he wanted to stay in the Nashville Predators organization, and the ask for O'Reilly was extremely high. It sounded like it was similar to what they were asking for Saros before they extended him last offseason. So it seemed like it was too much of an asking price to pony up for New Jersey to overpay for him, because O'Reilly didn't really want to leave Nashville. So interesting note there. But the Devils did try to make more improvements on this team at the trade deadline, but it never worked out to try and get Ryan O'Reilly, which would have definitely increased that team's center depth going into the playoffs. When it comes to the Minnesota Minnesota Wild. There were some recent talks about the Minnesota Wild and Kaprizov. He's going to be eligible for an extension this offseason on July 1st. It seems like multiple reports are indicating that the Wild really want to try and make him one of, if not the highest paid winger in the NHL. Now, I think the highest paid winger, I might be wrong on this, but I think it's Panarin with $11.6 million cap hit. So if they want to make him the highest paid winger, you're looking at like a $12 million contract. And I've seen some people say that with the way Kaprizov's played over the past couple of years, the Wild really wanted to sign him, he could push $13 or $14 million. So it's going to be a massive contract extension, whether it's Kaprizov staying in Minnesota or whether it's going to be a year from now when he hits free agency. Not exactly sure. Kaprizov might give it a pause for thought, given the fact that the Wild still make the playoffs, but they can't get out of round one. So he might want to try and have a change of scenery at the end of the day to maybe try and get out of the first round, or maybe he'll try and stay in Minnesota and try and bring that team to finally making out of the first round. But interesting to know there, that does seem like a Kaprizov extension, whether that be with the Wild or in free agency, could push $13 or $14 million on the average annual value. So that could be very intriguing there for the Wild. When it comes to the Calgary Flames, I've seen a couple of recent reports saying that when he hits free agency, don't be surprised if the Calgary Flames took a run at trying to sign Sam Bennett. Now, there's been some talk about the Florida Panthers keeping Sam Bennett and signing him to an extension, which I wouldn't be overly surprised if they did. But if they don't bring back Sam Bennett and he hits the free agent market, it seems like Calgary might be a team who tries to bring him in. Sam Bennett was drafted by Calgary Flames and developed by Calgary Flames. Never really worked out in Calgary, so he was dealt to Florida, where he has become a very lethal top six forward, a very hard to play against forward. Some people might call him a dirty player as well, with all the hits he's taken in the playoffs. So interesting note there, but the Flames, who obviously probably do regret trading Bennett to the Florida Panthers, where he's since won a cup, might try, and if he does hit free agency, once again, it has to be if he hits free agency, but if he does, they may try and take a run at him. I guess the Flames might be willing to pay him like a 3 to 4, maybe even a 5-year deal at somewhere $5+ million would be my guess. Not exactly sure about that, but we'll have to wait and see, because there's some reports saying that if Sam Bennett does hit the free agent market, the Calgary Flames might take a serious one at trying to get him. So we'll have to wait and see on that. Next, going over to the Tampa Bay Lightning. When it comes to the Lightning, we've heard a couple of recent reports that says that Isaac Howard, one of the Bolts' recent first-round picks just from a couple of years ago, is not signing an extension. He's going to be a UFA in August 2026, so not this year, but next year. And the Bolts GM has even come out to say that it seems unlikely at this point that Isaac Howard will wind up staying in the Tampa Bay Lightning organization. So it sounds like Howard and the Bolts, who a lot of people were hoping would wind up signing with Tampa, will not sign in Tampa. So that leaves a couple possibilities. One, he could leave as a UFA on August next year, or the second option is the Bolts could try and trade him potentially this offseason. We've seen a couple of instances where there are prospects who are really talented prospects who don't want to sign with their current team who get dealt. I think that the Bolts could probably get like a second or third round pick, or maybe another good young player in return for Isaac Howard, who I think eventually is going to be a really solid top 6 or middle 6 forward. Definitely a top 9 player who can be a really solid guy, maybe even put up like 50 to 60 points at the NHL levels. So we're going to wait and see what happens with the Howard situation. It's definitely going to be something we'll have to watch unfold over the next little while, but keep your eye on Isaac Howard, as he's going to be a name to watch out for over the next little while, especially after it sounds like he's not signing with Tampa anymore. And the last thing I want to talk about was the Vancouver Canucks. Could they go out this offseason and target Matthew Barzal? There's been a couple of recent reports I've seen from different sources saying that the Canucks, like we talked about, they need a second line center. They could definitely use someone either behind Elias Pettersson or maybe in front of Elias Pettersson to sort of give Pettersson a little more favorable matchups. And I've seen a lot of people say that, well, Horvat's name was mentioned to Vancouver a little while ago. What if they try to target Matthew Barzal? That would be interesting. This Canucks team's definitely in the midst of a shakeup. They traded JT Miller in the season. Brock Besser's not going to be brought back. So with all of this in mind, it seems like the Canucks are going to go through some sort of a change. And if they do go through some sort of a change, maybe they try and go after Matt Barzal. Barzal's a really lethal top 6 center. He's a really good playmaker. Not going to put you up a whole bunch of goals, but a very solid point producer nonetheless. I do think that if Barzal was available, there would be a couple of teams. I don't think he's available, but I think that the Islanders could move on from him in the right deal. So we're going to have to wait and see on that for sure. I think there's a possibility the Islanders could try and make some sort of a deal work with the Canucks. Like, the Canucks will have to probably pony up a really big asking price, like a really solid prospect, one of their roster players who's on the top end side of things. Probably a future first round pick, probably another young prospect or a mid-level draft pick. Like, they're going to have to try and pony up a big asking price if this is even possible for the Canucks. But it might make some sense with the way Elias Pettersson's played over the past little while. So that's an interesting thought. I don't think it's going to happen. I think Barzal is going to stay in the Islanders organization, but it's a very interesting concept to think of Matthew Barzal potentially going to the Vancouver Canucks. Definitely. That's all I'm going to talk for today. I love your guys' thoughts. Do you think the Canucks would be smart to try and go after Matthew Barzal? And if so, what sort of a trade ask do you think the Islanders would ask the Canucks for? Do you think that Bennett could go back to Calgary? Do you think Kaprizov will sign an extension in Minnesota? And if so, could it be 13 or 14 plus million? Do you think that the Devils should have tried harder to try and acquire Ryan O'Reilly at the trade deadline? And do you think that the Tampa Bay Lightning will trade Isaac Howard at some point this year in the offseason? Definitely your thoughts on all of that. Plus the news updates, the injuries and signing updates from our past couple of days. Definitely your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk for today. Remember to like this video, and if you'd like to subscribe below. Thank you for all your support. I'll know to you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget the subscribe button down below. Don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment section below. I also have a blog to make news, rumors, analysis. If that's going to check that out, I'll link that down in the description below. Can't wait to see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.